Welcome to our December webinar. I'm joined by Scott Lindell from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and Shep Erhart from Maine Coast Sea Vegetables, where they'll be giving us a behind-the-scenes look of a vibrant blue economy supported by seaweeds in the northwest corner of France. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everyone that the Northeast Aquaculture Conference and Exposition, also known as NACE, is hosted from January 7th to the 9th. There will be a link in the chat to register. The room block closes in 3 days on December 22nd at the Aloft Hotel. If you're still looking for a room, please book as soon as possible. Field trip spots at NACE are limited. If you are interested in a field trip, please register as soon as possible. Keep an eye out for aquaculture and Chilled Waters programming are coming out around the new year as well. We're also thinking about webinar topics for the year of 2026. If there are any topics you would like us to cover, please let us know in the chat. And for our reviewers on YouTube, please let us know in the comments. Feel free to leave us any questions in the Q&A tab. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. That's all from me, and please take it away, guys.
Okay. Thanks, Antoine.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks to MAIC for sponsoring our travel to Brittany. This is the first time I had been to Brittany, but Shep had been there many, many years ago. And I think what was and we're a good team to examine a place like Brittany from those perspectives. So while I'll talk about some of the sophisticated downstream processing and seaweed biology and culture we witnessed, I'm going to turn it over to Shep first to describe the history and the current state of wild harvesting, some of the ways they preserve, and the forms of seaweed that are for sale in Brittany. So Shep, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good day.
Trying to
Good
forward the
windy
screen.
day. Um,
There we
Next
go.
slide, please. Yes.
There we
Oh, nope. Back. There we go.
go.
Yes, they have been harvesting seaweeds in Brittany for centuries. It's a very mature sector. Uh, there are about 800 species, evidently, in the waters around Brittany. And by the way, Brittany looks a little bit like the coast of Maine in many areas. There's granite rocks and rugged coastline. Their tidal range, however, is quite a bit bigger, except maybe up in the Bay of Fundy, something between 4 meters and 14 meters. You can see here we're down in the low tide in the intertidal zone at low tide. Down at the lower left, you'll see it looks like they're harvesting. He's got, I think, some pieces of what they call royal kombu there, or it's Laminaria saccharinea. On the rock, though, I believe is digitata, which you'll see a lot more about that later. They harvest with big boats. In the middle, lower middle, Job, who is also traveling with us, is showing me some sea spaghetti. It's a terrific plant. It's officially called Hemanthalia elongata, and it really does look like spaghetti. It doesn't quite taste like it, but it's delicious. Scott's holding up on the right-hand side there, Laminaria hyperborea, which is again harvested mostly by big boats out in the deeper water. And behind him, by the way, is the Roscoff Marine Biological Station, which we'll spend a lot of time showing you more about. And then up in the middle is a shot of some of the ulva species, several different species, and I think there's some porphyra tucked in there with it, and some sea spaghetti. And then the little piece in the very center is a horse-drawn cart, probably taken from 100 years ago or less, maybe. But this is a reminder that back in the early 1930s, yeah, almost 100 years ago, somebody in a cart like this drove across a landowner's property that had rented it to some tourists, and the tourists complained. And from that confrontation started a whole long history of regulations of the seaweed sector. So they've been regulating and managing for over 100 years there. Next slide, please. So 6 of the most popular, I guess, or most used seaweeds for the culinary. And these are the culinary seaweeds for human consumption mostly. I've covered a bunch of them. Sea spaghetti there. Uh, Wakame actually grows prolifically in certain areas of Brittany. I think it was dropped off by some from ballast water from some boat from the Far East, and it's taken over and now is harvested and used extensively. Sea lettuce, dulse is very prolific. They have a pretty big harvest there. Not as big as Graham and Ann, but almost as big. Nori, different types of porphyra, and laminaire sugar kelp, which they call Cambu Royale. Yeah, Cambu Royale. So this chart put together by a company we stopped at, Board by Board, Coast to Coast, um, is actually indicative of a way they look at their seaweeds, very sustainably. They look at them in terms of when they can harvest them. This is about seasonality. These are the seasons in which you can harvest these seaweeds, and also the tides. This is the big tides of 2020 in this particular chart, but they only harvest at big low tides, very much like we do here. Next slide, please. So we're going to get into some of the regulations now. Seaweed, as I said, has been regulated for a long time. The regulatory body, of course, is in French, but it translates mainly to the Brittany Regional Fisheries Committee. If you get a license in Brittany, as opposed to Maine, you have to harvest a certain area and a certain species, and you may have a quota, and you have certain gear you can use or can't use. The timing's also aligned with the species life cycle, so they're very concerned about the ecosystem that seaweeds grow in and make sure that that's not being disturbed. And some species require a fallow season. The big kelps uh, that are yanked off the bottom by these boats that you see in the right here. These are the big brown algae seaweed harvesting boats that are there are not that many of them actually. There are only about 30 licensed boats to harvest digitata and hyperborea, and they have to use this special. Well, they don't have to. It was developed in 1960 though. This special big corkscrew thing. It's called a Scooby-Doo. Uh, Very un-French sounding name, but that's what they call it. Scooby-Doo. It's lying in his deck, and the upper boat's lying in the front of his deck. It's hard to see. The lower boat he's using one. They lower it down on a cable that can spin it, and they lower it down into the digitata bed or the hyperborea bed, and they spin it until it tangles everything up and yanks it off the ground. Pretty brutal. That's why they have to leave their sector that they're harvesting in. I don't know actually if it's 3 years in Iceland. They also use the same process. They have to leave it for 3 years to recover. Um, Anyhow, that's part of the fallow system that they follow. They get 60 to 70,000. Go back. I'm still looking at. They get 60 to 70,000 metric tons of this material from their sectors every season, and that's about 30 boats doing that work. Next slide, Scott. So these are they're different regulations for the on-foot harvesters. These harvesters focus mainly on Ascophyllum, rockweed, fucus, dulse, ulva, nori, spaghetti, sea spaghetti. They only produce 4 to 6,000 tons, which is still considerable, and most of that's Ascophyllum. Uh, Somewhat the same in Maine, actually. Most of total tonnage in Maine our total tonnage in Maine, by the way, is about combined tonnage of all Ascophyllum plus kelps and anything else. It's about 6,300 in 2022. Last couple of years, it's been up closer to 9,000. So it's a little more, but again, most of that's escaphyllum. And when the escaphyllum season is poor, it'll go back down. So it's going between 6 and 9. They're between 4 and 6. We've got about 75 entities. I don't know quite, I think that's basically harvesting operations. That's in 2021. These are the latest figures I could find. Um, they're not an official fishery, people who are harvesting on foot. So they only have partial benefits. They don't have full benefits. Benefits, I think, means things like unemployment, things that basically go with paying into the government. Beach cast harvesters focus on 3 or 4 different species that wash up on the beaches. Ulva, Gelidium, Sargassum, and they cannot be used. None of these can be used for human consumption. They have to be used for plants, animals, or extracts. The reporting there is very unreliable because some of these beach cast harvesters are licensed, some of them aren't. But according to one report I saw, they get up to 50,000 tons of ulva or ulva species, greens, and 12,000 tons of sargassum. It's still considerable. Okay, next one, please. Yeah, this is a quick comparison or similarities and differences. Maine and Brittany. The DMR is not authorized to limit the number of licenses issued, which they do in Brittany. They only issue so many licenses for each species. They can't set the total biomass, except in Cobscook Bay, DMR can set the biomass limits. Uh, and of course, in Maine, we have this issue. The Maine Supreme Court ruled in 2019 that you had to have ask permission. That's not the case in Brittany. That the government definitely owns the intertidal there, no problem. In Maine, seaweed harvesting license allows you to harvest any seaweed anywhere as long as you get permission. Um, Brittany, you have designated harvesting areas. They call them zones. So if you're going to harvest dulse, you have, I think there are 5 zones to harvest dulse in. And also for agriculture, there are only certain areas where you can set up an agriculture operation. And Maine does not distinguish between boat harvesters and mechanical harvesters or hand harvesters. Everybody gets one license. And by the way, yeah, Maine has not even had a licensing system since 1999. It was the first time they even had seaweed licenses. When I started Maine Coast Sea Vegetables back in the 70s, we didn't think about a license, not for years. So that's how I could say far behind than we are in that sense. We require a pre-harvest assessment in Cobscook Bay, but in Brittany, that's required by everybody. And we have a minimum cutting height here of 16 inches. In Brittany, it's only 12. That's interesting. And of course, we all have to report here, and everybody reports there. But I've noticed that it's hard to get up-to-date reports here in Maine, and it's hard to get up-to-date reports there in Brittany. So the reporting agencies are not keeping up with public disclosure. Okay, next slide. Yeah, this is interesting. They've got a tremendous amount of support, the seaweed sector in Brittany. These 4 major organizations. This is the Union of Professional Harvesters, and there are 35 of them. These are probably mostly the boat harvesters, but I think some of the the on-foot harvesters also are part of this organization. It's been established for over a decade. Um, the Union of Marine Plant Producers. This is all the producers. There's 25 of them there. We only have 3 or 4 in Maine, so it's quite different. Quite different. They're well established. Brittany has an algae cluster. Very envious of that. We tried one in Maine about 10 years ago. We weren't quite ready yet. They have 23 companies in it, 4 educational research institutes, professional orgs. They have 3 banking partners in their cluster and 17 municipal organizations. So that's a great confluence of stakeholders. They also have this remarkable organization called Merci les algues, which basically means thanks to seaweed or thanks to algae, because I think this includes microalgae. There is quite a bit of spirulina grown and other microalgae grown in Brittany. I don't have the numbers for that, but that's probably included here. And there are 160 members back in 2020. These are people that are all rooting for seaweed one way or another, upstream or downstream. Very important. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, now we're going to take a look at some post-harvest drying systems we saw. The first one was in France Aliotti. This guy had built a big chamber, maybe 50 feet long, 20 feet wide, where this is on the right hand side picture. The door to it's on the left hand side picture. It opens into that chamber. Pretty simple, fans in back and a heating system. And then he spreads his material, I think dulse mainly, and ulva is what he's drying in here on these racks over in the far right uh, with some kind of polymesh trays, and then rolls them in there and dries. We never got the volume or the cost, um, but pretty efficient. And we saw some of his, actually, they'll see in a minute some of his finished products. Next, please, Scott. This is another processor we visited. It had both a nursery and a processing facility. Scott will talk about more of the nursery side and the aquaculture side. For the processing, the first step was a washing system over in the lower left-hand corner underneath the canopy there. There's a fairly sophisticated two-stage washing. They rinse with salt water. These are all near the water, so they can pipe in their water. And then they stack their material. I think a lot of it ASCO in this case, but I think other plants too, other species. And those red racks in the middle there, these stacking racks. And then they roll them into these huge containers on the right, lower right. There are 5 of them. They look like 100 feet long and, 20, 25 feet wide. And in the back of them are these, on the upper middle picture is a view of the massive hot air moving system. They have a lot of ventilation. Takes them supposedly 2 days, 48 hours at 50 degrees centigrade to dry 1 ton of material. So they can get 5 tons done in 2 days. Pretty good, using these 5 containers, 5 canisters. Okay, Scott, why don't you take it away on the rest of
Sure.
Alior?
Yeah, Alior was an interesting company because uh, similar to a main entity, they both provided seed to companies in Brittany and then bought back product and dried it and ground it and provided it as ingredients. So their nursery is well, I should say they were since been bought by their largest customer, Algalesco. And that company has a 300-hectare lease where they cultivate sugar kelp and wakame only on about 150 of those hectares, producing up to about 200 wet tons per year. This nursery, you see a snapshot of it in the top left. They use 28 bulk transport containers, which each contain about 20 spools of 100 meters each seed string. That's about a 56 kilometer capacity. Currently, they were only producing about 40 kilometers of seed string. Algalesco says that their average yields on the farm are about 10 kilograms per meter for sugar kelp, 6 kilograms per meter for alaria, and 8 kilograms per meter for wakame. Just as a context for Maine. This company, Alior, also harvests about 80 tons of local wild seaweeds as well. Back to you, Shep.
Okay, let's move to the next one. Oh yeah, this is a wonderful processor we visited right outside of Roscoff, board to board, coast to coast. Henri Courtois is the originator, the owner, and the entrepreneur behind this operation. He's got the brown shirt on there. Um, and he unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, he would not let us take pictures, so I'll have to describe what happened inside. But he had a lot of gear. They mainly do not do drying. He does a lot of wet processing. They process sea spaghetti, dulse, sugar kelp, wakame, sea lettuce, all for the human consumption, all for the for stores and restaurants. They have a very sophisticated washing system in there and a grading system, a bubble water bath. They can also cut and chop up their seaweed, prepare it for a final salting. They have this the wash chopped seaweed gets automatically stacked in these kind of windrows on this conveyor belt, and then it gets slowly fed into a salting machine. Where I was watching them, they salt their product 25 to 50%. Um, this same machine actually can run in reverse if they want to bring in a bunch of seaweed, salt it to stabilize it for a week or a month, while they're, until they can break it down into smaller quantities. They can reverse this to take the salt out when they're ready to actually make it into a tartare or some kind of a tapenade. Pretty clever. Uh, so let's see. They have a very innovative line. I guess we're going to talk more about their. I guess let's go to the next slide. I think we're going to get into the value-added
Before we do, yeah,
seaweeds
before we do, Shep, I
because.
want to introduce some
Oh
of
yeah,
our
you've got a bunch to talk about.
co-travelers.
Yes.
Yeah. um, Shep and I have done enough traveling to know that if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far and you want to have fun, bring along a bunch of other younger, curious people. And we did in our network. I've been lucky to get to meet many Europeans who are at the forefront of seaweed biology and farming research. On the left here is Gabriel Montesinos. Some of you might know him since he formerly worked on a giant kelp project here in the US. But he's now at Hortemar in the Netherlands, a seaweed breeding company. Next is Job Cohen, who conducted some of his master's research in my lab here at Hui, but he's now about to finish his PhD at the Netherlands Institute for Sea Research. There's Shep and then Henri, and the next gentleman is Clément Gauchi. He recently completed his PhD at University Nord in Bodo, Norway. But he's now working for a seaweed farm and a seaweed hatchery in Brittany. Philippe Potin, next to me, was really our wonderful host who helped us connect to all these companies that we're talking to you about today. And finally, is on my other side of me is Brigitte Roos from Hortemar. Over to you, Shep.
Yeah, ready to go. So yeah, they've done a lot of work there on making their seaweeds very accessible to the consumers and restaurants and food service. I think partly because we'll see later that, well, yeah, this Roscoff Marine Station and SIVA, which is a Center for Study and Development of Algae, as well as the marine cluster, the algae cluster, and the Merci les Algues. They've all worked hard at developing the information and the promotion of their culinary seaweeds. So this is a very colorful presentation that Board put together that goes into all the textures of each seaweed and the different flavors of each seaweed and the uses of each seaweed and the nutritional analysis, which is really important. They've done a lot of work in nutritional analysis. And again, this is I think that a lot of behind the scenes work has happened with these other institutions that allow the producers to actually put this kind of information together. So let's move on to the next one. Next slide.
Can you see it?
Next slide. No? Yes?
That's it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Here's some of the value-added consumer products that don't use the drying process. These tartares, very popular over there. They're wonderful. They're like a tapenade, really, or a caviar. They're delicious. Um, and the Border Boy put together a guacamole with no avocados based on. Do you remember which seaweeds they're using in that guacamole, Scott? I can't recall right now. Something with
I think,
some
yeah, I think it
gelatinous
was
qualities.
either, yeah, it might have been wakame and ulva. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anyhow, very clever. This product development again, Siva, who we visited later, we'll talk more about later. They do a lot of help. They've helped a lot of companies with product development. They have a whole segment of their operation that's just to help companies with product development. I'm very envious. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Anyhow, can dream about it. Next slide. So
Sure.
here's a little display that we found at France Aliotti. He's got his alga de uh, culture. It's called alga de culture, which would be, farm seaweeds. In bags there on the left-hand side of his display. This is the left-hand picture. We've got these bags of farm seaweeds. We'll talk a little more about, or Scott will talk about his farms. He's growing some dulse. He's growing some sea lettuce and some kelp. And then he has a whole bunch of different tartars. And then on the far right, he's got this seaweed that is I think it's a potato chip, maybe a corn chip, but anyhow, chips and seaweed. And there's another, uh, I don't know what that is. It hasn't got an official name on it. It's something else in a bag, maybe is local. I think it's, I think it's, he did tell us. No, never mind. I can't remember. Anyhow, he's mixed it in with his abalone shells and his pictures of his abalones because he's also growing abalones because that's how he started this company, was growing seaweed to feed his abalones. Um, so he's mixing his products together for better sales. Perfect. Next one. This gentleman runs this store. On the lower left, you'll see a picture of his store in the background and his boutique algue, open to the public, ouvert au public. So he's built a store in front of his house. He had his drying shed behind him in his house, and his family, I think, probably produces most of this seaweed. It's mostly dried. I didn't see any of his. They don't seem to do any wet processing there. But he made some wonderful culinary seaweeds. Um, a goumonier, by the way, is what they call a seaweed harvester in French, uh, which I think that's the word they use. That's what he referred to himself as. And he has shelves and shelves. There are many shelves of seasonings, and he even made a cookie with some of his seaweed in it. Great entrepreneurial spirit, and again, I think um, heavily supported by this larger research and promotional industry behind him. We have something like that in Maine, in Portland, if anybody's heard of Heritage Seaweeds, but it's only open a couple of days a week and it's filled with other people's products, basically, and some of his own, I guess. Yeah, the fellow who runs it. It's not quite the same, it's somewhat similar, but maybe someday we'll have a whole seaweed dedicated store. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say about wild seaweeds, and I think most of the rest of this is on Scott. Take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Shep. Well, you've mentioned wild seaweeds, but we've also touched on some of the farm seaweeds like Allior and Algalesco, but I want to put the wild versus farm and the EU algae blue economy in context here. So particularly, we've heard here in France that the wild harvest is more than 100 times larger than the farm. And you'll see from this bottom left graph that there are many more, 10 times as many more companies involved in wild harvesting than farming in France. And in North America, we've heard a lot about the growing interest in crop biostimulants, but the French and others in Europe have been using wild seaweeds for a range of agricultural products, including biostimulants, for a long, long time, and exporting them around the globe. So we have a lot of catching up to do, a lot of learning to do, too, based on their experience. The top right graph sort of shows historically what seaweed production from various sources has looked like. The blue bars are wild harvesting. And you can see on a global basis with farmed kelp or farmed seaweeds, not just kelp, red seaweeds as well, have really predominated over the last couple decades. And that may be the future for expansion of seaweed biostimulants. But as you'll see, there's a lot of price pressure to include wild seaweeds in that. You'll see from the bottom right graph here just how many seaweed biostimulant companies there are by region, with Central Europe way ahead of others. Very interestingly, some of the larger seaweed consuming countries and producing countries, like Japan and South Korea, barely make it onto this graph. So we are privileged to tour two of these three companies and did a drive-by by the third, all involved in crop biostimulants or ag supplementation, if you will, purely based on wild or local or imported seaweeds. So I'll quickly introduce the three, and I'll spend a little more time on some of the details of them. So the Rulia group is really the oldest and most well-founded. They have about 10,000 employees spread around 120 countries in the world. We were privileged to tour their World Innovation Center in Saint-Malo, where this amazing R&D campus with extensive labs and greenhouses. It reminded me of some of the Silicon Valley campuses that I've been privileged to tour as well. Olmix was founded in 1995, has 900 employees. They too are operating all around the country, all around the world in 100 countries. We were fortunate to tour their specialized biorefinery. It was a national holiday on the day we were there, so we didn't get to see it in action. But I have to say, for both these tours, no photos were allowed. And then we did a drive-by by sort of the young kid on the block, Algaia. They extract compounds from Laminaria species and Ascophyllum, wild harvested for food, cosmetics, and biostimulants. So the Rulia group might be better known in the US to farmers by their trade name for their products, TMAC Agro. But they really focus on soil amendments, plant biostimulants, and products that improve animal diets and animal feed. They have about $4 billion in sales. And of those 10,000 employees I mentioned, about 8,000 are stationed overseas, just checking in on customers on a daily, regular basis. They're touching base with 2,000 farmers a day. They rely only on wild seaweed, mostly from Asia now, but they recognize the need that eventually they're going to need to include farmed seaweeds. They sell a variety of crop biostimulants. They focus on the efficient use of minerals for crop growth, soil life, improving the value of organic raw materials, and they even look into and talk about the care of the holobiont in the plant. They're very proud to use the whole seaweed. much like our Olmix does in our next company I introduce. We toured these, I mentioned their campus for innovation. They have greenhouses that have coffee from Kenya and soybeans from Brazil and tea from Thailand, all in soils that they import as well. And they're doing these extensive tests and phenotyping the plant response to the various ingredients that they're being exposed to. They have a conveyor belt that the potted plants will rotate through, and they'll take 3 different pictures, RGB, infrared, and some other heat-based system. Contrast, heat thermal contrast is called. And you'll notice in the bottom of this slide that they offer their own innovation awards, inviting entrepreneurs to join their sort of ecosystem and share their marine-based ag innovation, competing for funding. Guess that's what you can do when you're earning $4 billion a year. So the next company, Olmix, again, similar model, slightly different products that they sell. Also focused on plant care solutions for the soil and the plants. Also have a branch that focuses on animal care and technology for feed improvement. But I think that the lesson I learned from both these companies is that, yes, they're using all the seaweed. They also have ways of fractionating the seaweed to make it multi-useful. And they're also incorporating other ingredients. The example here for Olmix is that they are combining it with clay materials as a soil improvement, or clay, some other kind of clay materials and yeast to make it a food ingredient or amendment. Somehow the combination of the seaweed and the clay become an anti-mycotoxin effect for livestock in developing countries where that's a problem. Catch up here. Oh, so you might ask, where does all this seaweed come from? Well, this is a nice graphic. You can see the peninsula of Brittany in the northwest corner of France. And Olmix has strategic factory sites not very far from where the collections are in circles here. It's 10,000 tons of seaweed, mostly ulva, that they're collecting each year. That's about 1/5 of what's reported annually in the region. Most of it delivered from beach cast ulva, and also from Solaria on the southern coast there. They also import dry ulva from the Philippines to fill in at times of the year when the local wet ulva isn't available. They also shared that there has been some recent pushback about beach collection, given that it can be perceived as having some environmental impacts. They'd like to do 2 things. They'd like to develop collecting near shore, but not on the beach. And they also acknowledge the need for farm seaweeds someday when the costs can meet the customer's needs. So here's a picture of this ginormous beast of a machine that can be driven through the low intertidal of the beach with a belt on the front that will collect the algae in the water and dump it into the back of this big dumpster vehicle. Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. We didn't get to witness it on the beach, but I'm sure it's quite effective. If it can collect 50,000 tons of seaweed a year, or 10,000 for that matter. The Olmix extraction process is really pretty unique. Once the seaweeds come into their factory, there's an extensive washing step, and then it's ground up, and then it moves through this series of belts where they call it a phase separation, but basically it's separating liquid from solid fraction. And often that solid fraction needs to go through there twice to really get out all the liquids. And then much of that solid fraction may go into the enzymatic hydrolysis you see on the bottom left here to extract even more of the valuable liquid compounds. They're particularly interested in these marine sulfated polysaccharides like ovens and fucoidins. Those are the bioactive compounds that are of principal interest in immunomodulation in animals and biostimulation in plants. This is the glimpse we got of Algaia, the company I mentioned that's relatively new. You can see on the bottom left here a truck full of Hyperborea, Laminaria hyperborea, coming into the plant. We're standing outside the plant where we're not allowed to be inside the plant. And you can see them unloading the Hyperborea and going into this pre-treatment tank outside the factory. But they, not unlike Omics and the Rulia group, are trying to extract these functional ingredients for use across multiple applications. So, Shep, I don't know, do you want to introduce France Aliotis, or shall I?
What's next? Oh, well, yeah, they're growing some beautiful dulse in these big tanks at the bottom. And you'll see a picture in the middle there. And some really clean, great looking sea lettuce and these giant raceways. What's missing from this picture is the way they harvest all the out of the raceways is they drain it. All the raceways drain into this big trough, and they put the big Exactix type catchment canister.
Shep, we'll see that.
I
We'll see
guess
that
they're
on the
like,
next slide.
oh, is it
Shep,
in the
we'll
next
see that
slide?
when I show the
Okay.
video. Yeah. So
Oh,
let me
good.
just give a larger picture of this company. So Sylvain, the gentleman in the middle here at the bottom left, he's been at this for about 20 years. As Shep noted in the introduction, his first impulse was to grow abalone. That's where the money was, and still is. But he realized that you can't just go out and collect abalone seed. He had to produce it himself. So it's about half of not about half, maybe a quarter of the footprint of his farm is this abalone nursery in relatively small tanks. You can see these plexiglass plates or fiberglass plates that all have tiny little abalone growing on them. There are also diatoms growing on here. So this is his abalone nursery. Eventually, those get moved into offshore oyster bags that get stuffed with seaweeds that the abalone can eat, and then they get stuffed into larger cages as the abalone grow even larger. But he has to grow a lot of land-based seaweed to feed his abalone, but he also can grow more than the abalone need year-round. So he has developed land-based systems for growing ova and dulse. He harvests about 30 tons of ova a year and 10 tons of dulse through the different seasons. And on the next slide, we'll see the 6 40-meter by 5-meter D-ended raceways that are driven by paddle wheels to grow much of the seaweed. His farm offshore is about 4 hectares. He also grows sugar kelp on lines spaced about 5 meters apart. They're about 100 meters long. And he has about 10 kilometers of grow line producing between about a total of 100 tons a year. So we go to this next slide. You'll see that he's growing seaweeds in these very old looking tanks. And by contrast, he has these de-ended raceways, which I'll show you a slide of. And then at the very last view, Shep, we'll see the place where you can harvest from. Oh, shoot, not in this view. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But at the end of, yeah, you could describe it. You can see these, there's a standpipe here, right? It's in that trough. And if he pulls this standpipe down, he can start draining this directing it into a mesh tote to harvest the seaweeds. Is that what you recall, Shep?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy was full of ingenuity. What was his name? I can't remember his name.
Sylvain Huchet.
Yeah. Selena.
Yeah. Okay. So our next stop was the Roscoff Biological Station, established in 1872. By coincidence, that's very similar to the time that my former employer, the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, was established in 1875. And like Roscroft, like the MBL, Roscroft was situated in an area that was sort of the center of marine biodiversity. It's close to the North Sea and to the Atlantic coast, and it's sort of the transient of cooler water with warmer water, and hence there's a lot of biodiversity. This lab has really extensive wet lab and analytical lab facilities, as well as conference facilities. They conduct very well-noted basic research on ecology and physiology and genetics of seaweeds. And they have several applied research projects with industry, many of which you'll see, you're looking at the fruits of. Here in the center photo, you can see some modern LED lighting around a tumble culture of a dulse female gametophyte, really healthy looking. And the picture on the right shows kind of the old style of holding tanks that have been used for over a century. They have one of the most extensive seaweed and germplasm and strain collections in Europe. And it's the foundation of much of their basic research, but it's also used in many practical aspects too for the culture industry, small as it is. Some more examples of facilities. The tumble cultures on the left, they had a big tumble culture with not a shepherd. I could remember what kind of red seaweed was growing in this tank, but very, very nice tank system. Curious how they were holding their urchins in the top and feeding them with maize or corn kernels. In the bottom right, we met up with a fellow student of Clément's. This is Anne, also at Nord University, who is using the excellent facilities at Roscoff to do some gene transformation in kelps. Basically, I'm trying to understand, can you knock out certain genes and then discover how the genes are, the surrounding genes are functioning in terms of answering questions about genotype and phenotype. And then we really were so surprised and so enthralled with this organization, the Center for Study and Development of Algae. I think we're all hoping that something like this could be developed in New England. Perhaps this would be a great model for the new collaboration between Bigelow and Hatch Blue in terms of sponsoring or jumpstarting a blue economy, new kind of blue economy, and especially in the downstream processing. Ronan, our guide here, leads their sort of downstream processing and innovation. And so our tour was mostly focused on that, but we learned a little bit about some of their innovations in seaweed culture and other aquaculture endeavors they're engaged with. So these are
Excuse
just
me, Scott.
sure.
So we do want to give
Oh, we only have 10
people
minutes.
a
Yeah,
time to give questions. So if you want to wrap up, please.
yes, I can do that very quickly.
Wonderful.
These slides, people can look at this later and go into the details. This is just a snapshot of some of the innovations and projects they're engaged in. Wonderful facilities they have for conducting their work. I don't think I need to go into this either. This is the thing I think is really missing in Maine is having
Yeah.
research incubation to test product development and then additionally, you need to be able to analyze whatever it is you produce to know that you've got quality control and that you can do it consistently and safely.
Great labs.
I want to note that this is a really great website to go to look at some of the examples, some of the downstream data and analysis they've produced in many of these innovative collaborations. So write down sensalg.fr and check out those resources. And with that, I want to thank MAIC and also a special thanks to Dr. Philippe Potin, a senior researcher at the Roscoff Biological Station, for really making this tour possible, or as gratifying as it was, because he helped to really introduce us to these companies and institutions.
Yeah,
You can
he
reach
was
out
he was
to
an ambassador. He
he
was
really
great. He
is.
got us in the door. And
And
also, yeah, we
our emails are on the top right here if you want to reach out to us.
sure. We finished our
Thank
trip
you.
at Mont Saint-Michel on the right there, as you can see. It's a great destination if you ever get there.
Do we have questions in the chat?
We do have questions in the chat. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was awesome. Our first question is, are the French companies that are involved in wild harvesting seeing the impacts of climate change?
I
Uh,
would say yes in
yeah,
general.
very
Simple.
much so.
What do you think, Scott?
Very much so. Yeah. No, they are the reliability of beach cast. Storms are bigger but less frequent, so that's causing some issues. Uh, and a lot of these companies are relying on the beach cast. So yeah, it is a problem. Warming waters particularly in the southwest of the peninsula are a problem.
And I know there's a new management initiative that's in place that's not finalized yet, but they are managing because of some of the indicators of impacts from climate change on some of the harvests. Uh, so they're implementing some new management regulations.
Our second question is, you guys saw amazing stuff that makes us all so jealous. What is the first thing that we should bring to Maine? What is something we should emulate here?
Well, I think we touched on it in our last few slides. I think the SIVA people could teach us a lot. I would invite them to a forum.
I would like to see more harvester training, and I've been working with the Maine Seaweed Council to implement that in Brittany. Any professional harvester who wants to get a license has to complete a course in what they call mariculture, which I think is pretty thorough. And you take it at a institution, at a technical institution, or oh, we're off. Anyhow, that's what I want to see happen more in Maine, more education of harvesters before they get their license or in order to get their license. And there is a initiative afoot, and I think in the 2027 harvesting for Ascophyllum, anyhow, there'll be requirements for some kind of training.
I have another question for you guys. Does the nutrients change between what is found in seaweed in Brittany and Maine?
Say that again.
Does the exchange between what is found in seaweed in Brittany and Maine?
Can't answer that.
Well, I'd say one thing that we're unified in when it comes to kelps is that high iodine tends to be a concern both among processors of kelps in the US and in Brittany. That's been a recurrent theme we've heard. And there are initiatives in Europe to lower the threshold of acceptable iodine. And that's a concern for researchers who don't see necessarily a scientific basis to that, and the processors who are trying to meet these regulatory authorities' needs.
And we've heard there's some good news about iodine coming out of Europe, but we don't know what it is yet. It hasn't been announced officially, but Susan Holt in the Scottish
No, Denmark.
conference we just went to said that there's some kind of good news coming out about iodine consumption uh, out of Europe. Research.
I have another question for you guys. Do folks in the French aquaculture industry feel overly regulated, or are they generally okay with the government input?
What did you hear, Shep?
I can't answer that one. I didn't hear anything.
I think that means they're they're probably more satisfied than dissatisfied.
They're used to regulation over there like we aren't. Put it that way too. They've been regulated for a long time and it's just part of their culture.
Right. Did you see any sea urchin farming? You mentioned abalone.
We did not hear or see any sea urchin farming.
Didn't hear about that. No.
They were only holding
Wow.
sea urchins for research at Roscoff.
And we'll do one more question. So I have a large quantity of ova that washes up in our cove each year. I want to know how I can harvest it, what to do with it, would I need to test it for heavy metals and PCBs or anything else? How would I go about doing that?
Well, washing is very important. Ulva collects a lot of very fine sand, I've noticed, all the Ulva I've experienced. So you want to wash it in salt water. Uh, and then, the process I know best is drying for stabilization. I think it could be frozen, but I'm not sure what happens after you freeze Ulva. It might turn into kind of a mush. But drying, you want to lay it out on racks. Sun drying, of course, is optimal. If you can't do that, pick a warm, dry area that's not too hot. You don't want to cook it over 90 degrees, 85, 90. And it'll take a while, but it's thin. All of it's pretty thin, so lay it out fairly in sheets, so it's not too bunched up. You should get it dried. I don't know what kind of end product you're using it for, but you'll get dried sheets of it at that point, and then you can crumble it up. It's pretty strong tasting, so beware of that. Did it say? Did the person ask say what they're going to use it for?
They
No.
did not know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, personally, I have a hard time as a culinary seaweed. It's challenging, but we do sell a lot at Maine Coast Sea Vegetables. Well, we sell some. It's definitely not our most popular seaweed. It can be mixed with tea. There's a company that makes tea using alva mixed in with other herbs and teas, black tea, green tea. It can be part of a seasoning mix mixed in with maybe or nori, uh, porphyra, laver. Those are some of the things we mix it with. Yeah, we mix it with dulse and nori for a mix, a seasoning mix.
Serafina chimed in that she wouldn't recommend eating it if it was beach cast.
Good point.
You don't know where it's been before it was
Good
cast.
point. Yep, good point.
We do have one more question if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
I'm here.
Any pathogens to worry about?
Any pathogens? Pathogens being spread to people or between seaweeds?
Um, it was not specific, but let's say people.
I think they're probably talking about people.
Yeah.
Well, food safety is becoming more and more important in the industry. And of course, it's been eaten for hundreds of years with people not doing much more than just drying it and eating it. But there's a lot of things floating around in the ocean now. So yes, I wouldn't worry about it, but I'd be um, mindful. Um, I don't know, Serafina, do you have any more guidance in the food safety? It's never been my forte, and I know in France they're very strong on it. Uh, they make sure that you don't keep it in a heated space for too long. You don't make sure it doesn't, you start decaying on you.
I wasn't meant to be part of this presentation, but again, I think it really pertains to where it's coming from, what you know about it, and where it's going. So if the pathogen question was about beach cast seaweed to human consumption, then yes, you'd have something to be worried about. But generally speaking, if you're paying attention to your moisture level and your water activity, if you're going to dry, you can easily get to a low enough level where you're not worried about that, as long as you know where it's coming from and how it's being handled along the way. If you're going with fresh, we still, I would say, some things to learn. And I don't think I know enough about that to speak with any certainty.
I know in the salted seaweed, if you put enough salt in your wet seaweed to as in, we know that salted fish for centuries have been eaten, and salted seaweeds are the same. And we've done some experiments at UMO actually, and in RNO on salted seaweed. And if you get up to 30-40% salt, it does seem to have an impact on the ability of pathogens to take foothold. So that's another way of preserving your seaweed, I guess.
So we don't have any other questions. So I'd like to give a big thanks to both Scott and Shep and Sharafina for joining late. Thank you both for presenting today. Oh, Josh is raising his hand. Okay, so it is beach cast.
Beware. Beware.
Should they test for metals?
Yes, if you're gonna, yes, I would say yes. And um, sea lettuce, what is it high in? Not arsenic, not inorganic arsenic. I think it's which is it? Cadmium? Is it fairly can be high in cadmium? Can't remember. Maybe Serafina can fill in there too. But yeah, testing for metals is always a good idea with beach cast. You don't know where it's been floating in from.
Yeah, if you have any more questions about that, please feel free to email myself, Shep, or Scott, and we can get you guys connected with that.
Okay.
And with
Great.
that being said, I'm gonna end the webinar. Thank you guys, everyone, for coming. Just a reminder that NACE is January 7th to the 9th, and the room block at the Aloft Hotel closes in 3 days on December 22nd.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, you Mace,
Thank
for
you.
Bye.
sponsoring this. Whoop.
Yeah. Bye all.